Well, thank you all so much for being here today. My name is Heather French, and I'm the Fellowship Program Director at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And I was one of the members of the Milestones 2.0 working group. And so we were excited to be able to present the work that we've done to you all today, just because the milestones will go into effect in July. So we wanted to give you all some information about the milestones and then also leave a lot of time for questions, a question and answer session at the end. So thanks again for being here. So let's see here. So just a quick introduction to who is in the working group. So our working group is a group of all volunteers. It included 8 fellowship program directors, 3 outstanding neonatal fellows, and then some representatives from the ACGME, all of whom are listed here. And our objectives today are to review the rationale behind why Milestones 2.0 was created, describe the modifications that were made to create the milestones for neonatology, and to make sure that everyone's aware of the different milestones. So there are subspecialty specific milestones that were created just for neonatology. There are harmonized milestones that address variability across specialties by establishing a common purpose and goals while allowing specialties to be able to customize those milestones to meet their needs. And then there's also a subspecialty specific supplemental guide that can help programs identify how to provide a rating scale for their trainees. We'll also explain that rating scale for trainees. We will discuss the impact that we anticipate that the milestones will have on your faculty at your home institution, and then talk through strategies for implementing the milestones at your institution. So whether you like it or not, the milestones or not, they are definitely here to stay. So we're glad that you're here because it's essential that all academic faculty understand and use the milestones effectively so that we actually get useful data on our trainees. And I'm sure you've all heard this before, but the purpose of the ACGME milestones really is to set clear expectations for trainee performance at all stages of training. This includes both residency and fellowship. Its goal is also to provide a shared mental model both within and across institutions to objectively interpret trainee performance, to provide clear and actionable feedback to trainees, and then to decrease time that's spent completing trainee evaluations. Really, the milestones are meant to make your life easier, even though I know probably all of us have experienced times where it feels like it's making them a little bit harder. So hopefully the 2.0 version of the milestones will actually make things a little bit simpler and more streamlined for you. So when we think about just a quick review of evaluations, if we were to look at it, at a 10,000-foot view, competencies, if we were to look on the right side of the screen and we're really zooming in to our trainees, the milestones are really the discrete, actionable, evaluative actions that trainees perform. And then if you zoom out, EPAs, or entrustable professional activities, are how we integrate all of those milestones into the types of care that we need to provide for our patient population. So competencies, subcompetencies, and milestones all come from the ACGME. And fellowship programs have to report milestone data, which is determined by the CCCs, or the clinical competency committees. And twice yearly, we have to report milestone data to the ACGME. And again, competencies and their milestones are the building blocks for EPAs. Right now, we're not required to report EPAs, but EPAs ultimately will be reported to the American Board of Pediatrics. At the end of fellowship training, all program directors have to certify that their graduating fellows have either performed satisfactorily, marginally, or unsatisfactorily to the ABP. But by 2028, we will be actually reporting EPA data to the ABP, which will actually kind of formalize that, those markers of satisfactory, marginal, or unsatisfactory. We'll formalize that a bit. As I'm sure you all remember, the ACGME 6 competencies are patient care, medical knowledge, practice-based learning and improvement, interpersonal and communication skills, and professionalism. And then within each competency, there are general skills and behaviors that are required for a person to be competent within a given competency. So milestones are defined performance levels that residents and fellows are expected to demonstrate for skills, knowledge, and behaviors. So just a quick overview of evaluations. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie Berlin.
Hi guys, can you hear me? All right, so we're going to go through the rationale for the development of the Milestones 2.0. So we outlined the rationale behind the development of these milestones in a paper published in the Journal of Perinatology this year. The goal of this paper was to introduce the milestones from the conception by the ACGME through our development of the milestones. And so we'll review a lot of these pertinent concepts in today's webinar. Next slide, please. So after receiving feedback from the initial milestones, the ACGME identified several concerns raised by stakeholders and sought to address these by creating Milestones 2.0. Specifically, the goals were to increase the effectiveness of the assessment tools by including subspecialty specific expectations for patient care and for medical knowledge. We also wanted to decrease the length and complexity of each individual item, and we wanted to minimize the inconsistencies across the different specialties by providing common, harmonized milestones. The goal was also to simplify the text of the milestones and to create a supplemental guide previewed here to help with understanding. Next slide, please. So this is a graphic taken from our paper in Journal of Perinatology, and is a good, I think, breakdown of the comparison between the Milestones 1.0 and 2.0. And again, we'll go through this in greater depth and detail through the course of this webinar. But this is kind of, again, an overview. So you can see in the Milestones 2.0 that they are far more simplified and they are far more specific to neonatology. So instead of, for instance, provide transfer of care that ensures seamless transitions, we've now broken down into things such as neonatal and maternal history, physical exam, disease management in the NICU, and then things such as procedures and emergency stabilization, which are not always seen in other specialties, but are very important to neonatal perinatal medicine. We also added the section on interpersonal and communication skills with a specific milestone of complex communication with patients' families around serious news. So with that, I'm going to hand off to the next person. I apologize. I am in the hospital today. We're seeing some patients, so I will have to step out after this. So please feel free to ask the rest of my panelists questions, and then you can always email me if you have any questions specific for me. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Katie. I'm Courtney McLean, Program Director at University of Nebraska. So I want to talk a little bit more about the components. So like alluded to, there were the neonatal milestones. Those will be coming out officially implementing next month, and then the supplemental guide. And so I'm going to show some examples of all of these and how they will, they are tools to really help you evaluate your trainees. So while the 6 competencies, like Heather mentioned, are staying the same, it's really the sub-competencies that change, and the areas specifically of patient care and medical knowledge, like the Katie's slide showed, are really where things become very specific for neonatology. And so yes, there are 5 more sub-competencies in the Milestones 2.0. Yes, there are more. However, these additions were chosen to really address our areas of practice, with each sub-competency covering one domain rather than numerous domains at the same time. So really our intention is for more clear assessment, to help guide and place your fellow where they are during their training. So let me show you what that exactly looks like. Next slide. So if you are in fellowship leadership, or you've been in a CCC, this should look familiar to you. So this is our current previous milestones, patient care 3, develop and carry out management plans. You might recognize the paragraph of words in each level on this graph, trying to choose where does your fellow land across these levels. Now, compared to milestones 2.0, a lot less words, just the visual. We wanted to show side by side really the visual and how different they are. And so this is patient care 5, disease management and neonatal care. You see level 1, develops and implement care plans for patients with low level of acuity complexity. Going up to level 4, managing patients with multiple levels of acuity complexity while anticipating future needs and minimizing long-term consequences. So really that graduated progression of skills within this subcompetency. Next slide. So to keep with patient care 5, we wanted to show you what the supplemental guide looks like. So this is from the supplemental guide, and each subcompetency has a table like this. So at the top, in the blue, you see the subcompetency and the overall intent for evaluation. On the left-hand side, you see levels 1 through 5 of milestones. And then on the right, you see specific examples, neonatal specific examples for each individual milestone. So looking at that level 4 milestone, one of the examples promotes early extubation, optimal nutrition, and family-centered care for extremely preterm infants to decrease rates of BPD. So that is just one of the examples that we had for this specific subcompetency. One of the things we really tried as a working group in coming up with these examples is incorporating diversity, equity, and inclusion within some of our examples to really help push your fellows in that realm. So the supplemental guide also includes, in the yellow at the bottom, really recommended assessment tools for the subcompetency. So for disease management, really direct observation, multi-source feedback, and simulation. And then the green, which we did not include all of the resources, but these are really resources and references about this subcompetency specifically. So like I said, a chart like this is available for every single subcompetency in the supplemental guide. Now I will hand it over to Catherine Redford.
So while our committee reviewed every milestone across every competency and competency, the ACGME had developed quite a few of these prior to our review. These are the harmonized milestones, and they did this to ensure consistency across all of the specialties. Our committee developed the language for the subcompetencies under patient care and medical knowledge to be NICU specific, but most of the subcompetencies across the other core competencies system-based practice, practice-based learning, professionalism, interpersonal skills were initially developed by the ACGME. And this was really to help improve the large number of discrepancies that existed in Milestones 1.0 across programs. And by doing this, they avoided a lot of that variability in expectations across these competencies that are important skills that really need to be developed similarly in all specialties. Our committee looked at all of those, reviewed all of these milestones to make sure that they fit our needs in neonatal perinatal medicine. So an example might be that while we need to have excellent communication skills with patients' families, we may not be explaining diagnoses to our preemies. So on our next slide is an example of one of these subcompetencies. If you go to the next slide. Yeah, thanks. So this is practice-based learning and improvement 1, evidence-based and informed practice, and its associated milestones levels 1 through 5, developed by the ACGME. We made sure all of this language made sense for neonatal perinatal trainees and the faculty and programs that are evaluating them. So then on the next slide, we flesh this out even further in our supplemental guide. So this explains in the gray on the right-hand side how these milestone levels might manifest in a trainee. So we used NICU-specific examples, and where we're able to, again, we try to carry a theme through the milestone levels here, discussing a patient with NEC, identifying what is the appropriate evaluation and treatment for NEC, and might need guidance in level 1. And then as you get higher up into level 4, reviewing the literature that weighs redirection of care for a patient with NEC totalis. We again tried to incorporate ways that attention to diversity and inclusion can manifest in every subcompetency, here discussing how social disparities might impact outcomes for patients with NEC in level 3. And then again in yellow, through each subcompetency throughout the supplemental guide, you'll see different ways to assess the trainee in each of these subcompetencies. So next I'll turn it over to Dr. O'Reilly, who's going to talk about how to apply the milestones to the trainee.
Yeah, so after all of this information and a lot of the different interpretations of the levels, we're still left with the uncertainty of being able to grade fellows according to these levels. So one of the things that I have found helpful in this slide is actually from an ACGME course that I took on assessment, is to think about it as a developmental trajectory. That's really what we're trying to do, is help them along their growth and their learning as a fellow. One thing that's important to note is that they do reset after residency. So they will have done the residency milestones, and where they landed on a particular milestone may not particularly apply in their fellowship. And so really like everybody who is assessing fellows in the CCC to have a reset for fellows as they enter. As you can see on this developmental trajectory, they begin at a novice level and progress throughout their fellowship to be advanced and competent. And then the goal of training is to be proficient. And not necessarily be an expert at the end of their fellowship, but to be very well regarded and skilled within these competencies and subcompetencies, so that you feel like they will continue to grow and potentially be able to be at the higher levels. But a level of 3 is proficient, and that is the goal for graduation from fellowship. Next slide. And I think I mentioned, but again, it's important to remember that the fellows do reset upon entering from residency, and that their developmental trajectory will vary depending on the type of learner that they are. But you really want to focus on the progression of their skills, use these milestones and the descriptors and the supplemental guide to help you embrace a shared framework for their progression in the CCCs. And really focus on high quality, frequent, and robust assessments. You've heard people mention multi-source feedback and direct observation being 2 of the most important, but we have so many other things, and your program may be different in terms of whether you get input from parents of patients, whether there's a lot of simulation. All of those things are incredibly important to be able to really assign the level for the fellows. So levels 4 and 5 are aspirational for fellowship. It's more representative of an expert, or what we sometimes refer to in medical education as a master adaptive learner. And you'll probably notice in many of the level 4 and level 5 words like role models, coaches, and those descriptors are meant to really show somebody who is at this a higher or expert level of their field. Somebody who embraces a growth mindset, has strong skills about self-assessment, really being open to feedback and changing, and if they make a mistake, embracing it and sharing it with others, having really strong skills of reflection, and then coaching others. So making that shift from becoming an expert in their field to then helping others along. So not necessarily teaching always, although that could be part of it, but being able to really share their knowledge, help somebody else discover something new, and become that expert in the field. That is the goal of levels 4 or 5 on the milestones.
I'll take it from here. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We want to do a couple slides on kind of the impact on you, whether you be faculty, fellow, program leadership, whatever role you may be in. And a lot of what we are making a point toward today is for program leadership and thinking about some of the training and faculty development that will be needed with the new milestones. So really working with new fellows along with current fellows to talk about how levels are so-called reset when entering fellowship, and that these milestones are different than their pediatrics residency milestones, and we expect their levels to go down in a new environment, in a new role. Same goes for the faculty development that'll be needed to talk about the new sub-competencies and really trying to help people know that 3 is a great place for a fellow to be, and that we expect fellows to sometimes be at a 1 or a 2, and all throughout kind of what that level setting is. And then for faculty who do ratings on evaluations with residents and fellows, making sure that they know that while some of the milestones may look very similar, they're actually different. And in particular with the harmonized milestones that could appear the same without kind of looking at the anchors more. Same if they work with fellows from multiple pediatric subspecialties, to consider how evaluation forms may look similar but are actually different. And again, we'll keep saying this, that the really graduation attainment, the goal is a 3 across all milestones at time of graduation. We know some fellows will have more skills in some areas and will be higher than this. And there will still be things that people are working on at time of graduation. A 3 isn't a requirement, but a goal. Next slide, please. So as you think about your institutional approach to milestones, know that kind of the exact implementation is going to look different across institutions and be driven by the fellowship leadership team to determine how to practically apply these at their own institution within that context. They'll be thinking about what evaluation forms are made and based on who will evaluate and across what rotations. There will hopefully be different evaluations, not just one evaluation that has every single milestone, but really making it appropriate to a rotation or a location. They'll be thinking about how often to ask raters to do evaluations, how frequently to distribute them, and of course also knowing that the ratings aren't everything, ensuring that there are qualitative comments. And then again, this is another thing you're hearing us repeat, thinking about other assessment models and tools, so that we're not getting information about where fellows are on their milestones only from evaluation forms, but also from other tools such as multi-source feedback, simulation, direct observation, meeting with advisors and mentors. And then local teams will think about how to get all that information and equip the clinical competency committee to be making the final ratings every 6 months for all the trainees. And I will turn it back now to Dr. Heather French.
Thanks. So just a reminder that the milestones go live on July 1. So if your fellowship program hasn't started working on replacing old evaluations with the new ones with the 2.0 milestones, my program included, we really need to get a move on it. So these, we need to start collecting data with the new milestones in July. And the first time we will have to report this data to the ACGME will be in the November to December timeframe. And then, to make things a little bit more complicated, we had mentioned the EPAs are untrustable professional activities. And our reporting of this will be around the corner. So the ABP does plan to incorporate the EPAs into the initial certification decision-making by 2028. So when and how your institution decides to start using the EPAs really is up to you until 2028, when they will be required to be reported on. And so again, your fellowship program can determine the timeline of incorporation by 2028. The one thing that the ABP is working on to help us out is there is currently a Delphi process going on in an attempt to try to map the existing Milestones 2.0, which are all seen here on the right side of the slide, with an EPA. So for instance, these were just my answers. This is not what actually has been released by the ABP yet, but for EPA 1, being managing patients with acute common single system diseases in an inpatient setting. I'm a member of the Delphi group, and a lot of our the working group, the 2.0 Milestones working group, are participating in this project. The milestones that I thought best represented EPA 1 are checked here. So there's going to be several rounds of Delphi going on, and hopefully we'll come up with consensus as to which milestones map best to the EPAs in an effort to really help our fellowship programs employ the EPAs more easily. So we probably won't have this ready for prime time, probably for another 6 months. So if you want to delay the EPAs for another year or so, I think that's totally fine, because then we will have some tools for you. So that is what is coming. And for now, we wanted to just, pause the slides, and we've left a half an hour for questions. So I'm going to turn over question moderation to Lindsay Johnston and Margarita Vasquez, and we've asked Patrick Myers, Megan Gray, and Beverly Robin to be our answer experts, our Q&A experts. But certainly we're hoping this can be as interactive and we can get to as many questions of yours as we can. So I'm going to turn it over now. I'm going to stop the slideshow and turn it over to Lindsay and Margarita.
Okay. So the first question we have, and I'll ask Patrick if you can answer this, is if we're going to have an EPA 2.0.
I saw the question in the chat, and I don't think so. I think the first goal of the ABP is really just to map the milestones onto the EPA and get a system up and running. I am sure that just like Milestones 1.0 and to 2.0, there will eventually be an EPA 2.0, but I've not heard David Turner, who's the ABP VP in charge of EPAs, say that in any way, shape, or form. I think round one is really just trying to homogenize Milestones 2.0 with EPAs, get it up and running, and start getting some data so that we can make it effective and use it for certification. And I just saw the question flash up that they don't map out, and that is totally correct. And so that's one of the things that the Delphi group is working on, is how do we take Milestones 2.0 and use it in a kind of streamlined way so that we're not doubling the work of the program directors. I think that ONTBD's had a lot of discussions with the ABP about, like, we can't add additional burden to the program directors, the CCC, by adding a totally new independent thing on top of it. So I think our vision is to, one, be very thoughtful about how to map them on the milestones onto EPAs. And then I actually think that we need a automated system, meaning either ACGME, ABP, but most likely the first stages is an Excel sheet or a Access document that once you input your milestones, it automatically generates EPAs. That's actually relatively easy to build. And I know that the ABP has talked about having a more formal way to build that as well. So you enter your milestones, it generates EPAs, and then you as a program director or CCC can adjust the EPAs so that you're not stuck. I hope that that answers the question to start. But so short answer is no, long answer is probably yes, but we're going to try to bridge the middle.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I'm sorry, Meg, I'm not able to send you the questions privately. There's some sort of limitation. So I'm going to give the next question to you. And the question is, do you advise to change faculty evaluations to look like milestones? I know ACGME has advised against that in the past, but many programs are doing it anyway.
I think
Thoughts?
if you want to use the direct language from the milestones with your faculty, you need to update it to the new language, and it would probably be a thoughtful year to think about asking your faculty for input in a different way and then encouraging your CCC to translate that input into milestones output. And I know that's a little more painful because you can't just look at the numbers and round up or round down. But I think it also offers you the opportunity to overcome the issue of doves and hawks in your faculty and to have the CCC be more thoughtful about the comments they're reading and how that translates to the evaluations. I think there's a real risk in showing them the new milestones and having them not read the new language and just keep assigning to, you know, the same numbers they've always assigned. And now you've got too high of numbers for what your actual skill set is. But I feel you. It's painful.
Okay, thank you, Megan. The next question I'm going to have Beverly tackle. And the question is, I know that level 4 and 5 should be aspirational, but the national data show 30 are fellows at levels of 4 to 5, medium levels of 4.9. I feel programs are more generous than they should be.
So I think this is an issue regardless of whether it's milestones 1.0 or 2.0. And I think this really goes back to faculty development, really working with the faculty on assessment. What does it look like? And it can go back to really the image that Deirdre showed. But where is that trainee along that trajectory? We have this constant battle, I know, in my institution, where I see people rate fellows at a 5 when they're a first or second year fellow. And I think it's really a misunderstanding of where do those fellows really fall. So I really encourage people, as you roll out the new milestones, really do some faculty development on looking at the levels, on looking at the expectation. And it's not necessarily that a level 2 falls with a second year fellow. But if you look at the trajectory of the image that Deirdre shared, you can think about the novice, the advanced learner, somebody who's competent, and where do they really fall? Because most likely learners as fellows during their program are not going to be falling at a level 5, and maybe some will, but that will be rare. So I really think it goes back to faculty development and really working with the faculty on understanding how to use the milestones, how to use the evaluations, and really think thoughtfully about where does this trainee fall.
Really awesome point, Beverly. Thank you so much. And I think that dovetails nicely. There was some chat questions about how to access the supplemental guide. So we had shared the link to get those. They were a little bit more delayed in the Milestones 2.0 and being available. But I think that faculty development, showing people what the examples are going to be, is going to be really helpful. I wanted to put it out to our panelists. Are there particular things that you guys are really excited about? I'm not going to assign it to one of you because I don't know if one of you is particularly excited, but do you think there's opportunities or really great things that are going to come from these that are going to help us sell this to both our faculty members and our trainees?
I think we're going to be partial, so it's hard to really not put that in there. But we, as you know, we've put so much work into this. To me, it's exciting because they now really apply to the assessment of our trainees. It's no longer trying to figure out where do we fit our trainee into these ambiguous things. I think the fact that they're so specific now in neonatology is going to make the CCC scratch their heads less and really think through the milestones and use them, I think, in a more meaningful way. So I'm looking forward to that first CCC meeting in November, December, and seeing how that goes and seeing how the faculty use them, because I guess we can't be impartial, but I think they're so much better than they were and much more applicable to our field.
Agree totally. Thanks, Beverly. Patrick and Megan, do you have anything else that you are excited about?
I would say that I'm am both dreading and excited to redo my evaluations, because I think just the time crunch of like trying to like get good evaluations built. But I think there's so much, hopefully these will be so much more tangible and practical, that you actually will have milestones that you can use to kind of nudge or shove your fellow in a direction, as opposed to, you know, dealing with some of the prior milestones where they would ask you, well, what does my 2.5 mean? And where you look at the language and you're like, well, we weren't sure either, but compared to other fellows, you're here, right? So I think that just the practical nature of it, I think, is I'm really excited about it, and hopefully we can have more actionable moments from the CCC.
I'm jazzed about the rebranding of the novice, right? In the past, we've had people really hesitant to assign a level 1. Some of them sounded really negative. Some of them sounded like a setback from residency. And now the novice is like the perfect starting point for someone coming out of residency and stepping into a fellowship role. The novice is who they are, and it's positively worded, and they can sit in that space and be feel proud of starting the journey, rather than being like, oh, I've just had, you know, like a setback.
Megan, I have to second that, and also thank you, because you kept us honest throughout the process. For that, we paid a lot of effort, a lot of attention and effort to making sure we took out any negative or sort of critical language. And so I think that's a huge improvement, and we really can thank you for that.
Okay, the next question, Patrick, I'll see if you can tackle this one. How do you overcome the idea of the need to show growth by increasing the fellow numbers each CCC, and that there isn't a stalling in training if a fellow doesn't progress in every area each 6 months?
I think it's consistent level setting at faculty meetings and at semi-annual reviews. Like, I'm finishing up my semi-annual reviews right now, and I have said, hey, milestones are changing. You may be at this level now, but I anticipate that numbers are going to go down, and that's fine because we actually have more actionable data. And I have multiple faculty meetings and every semi-annual review, I explicitly say, a 3 is good enough for graduation. A 4 is very aspirational. 5, there will be few faculty members that actually achieve a 5. But that's what we should all aim for, even if we don't get there. And it's just consistent long-term level setting, and that's hard to do. But I think, but over time that pays off. Like, my fellows don't grouse when they sit at a 2.5 for, 18 months. Because they know where they're headed. And also it's a good way to kind of say, like, well, the 3 is here. Do you actually think that you're here? And often people will be like, oh, actually, no, right? So.
It's also important to remember that fellows can drop as well, as regardless of milestones 1.0 or 2.0, that fellows can drop in the 6-month period. And I think one of the important things, just to dovetail on what you're saying, Patrick, is to really have the fellows work with the milestones. I have them actually assess themselves and assign milestones before I meet with them. The first time I did that, they really didn't have a good understanding, and they put themselves at 4 and 5s. And then it sort of came back to where they really should be. And I've enjoyed watching that progress, and I think it makes it more helpful for me to use the milestones when they understand and they can assess themselves using them too, so they have a better understanding of it.
Awesome discussion, guys. Patrick, I'm going to make the next question for you as the ONTPD chair. As the question from our Q&A is, would the ONTPD help develop new evaluation guidelines based upon the new milestones?
I hope so. We're actually, the EPA to Milestones group is meeting, I think, Friday morning, and we budgeted an extra half an hour time to start thinking about what are ways that we can share among all the programs, and maybe even do some thinking about research projects that could spring for that. Because I think that there's 110 programs. If we can, I think the national curriculum is just an amazing example of like why recreate the wheel in all 110 programs. And if we can start doing that with both EPAs and milestones, and also then do rigorous research to kind of lead the field, because every subspecialty is going through Milestones 2.0. I think we're organized enough as a group, and we're motivated enough as a group that we actually can be leaders in these 2 areas. So I'm really hoping more happens over the summer, and then we can really organize and get moving at NCE. So please come in October.
Thanks, Patrick.
Yeah, we've got multiple research ideas if people are excited to get involved in Milestones research.
All right, Beverly, the next question is for you. Are there any specific faculty development resources which would be helpful?
I was actually looking when I read that question. So the ACGME does have an assessment, and I'm sorry, Eric Hombo and a group of people put out sort of a resource on assessment. There is an assessment guidebook, and I think there's a number of other resources out there. But I think what's important is to understand as you're creating your own evaluations, understand what you have assigned, like how you determine what is a level 1, what is a level 2, what is a level 3. It's something I've done on my own. So we use MedHub. When you go to click on the evaluation, it gives you the definition of that a level 1 is a early beginner and a level 2 might be an advanced beginner. And so my definitions are in there as faculty go to click. I'm not sure that it really helps. But I still have the issue with their assigning levels that are too high, but I think having that in helps to some extent. And then there are a number of resources that ACGME has, so you can always look for those.
Thanks, Beverly. We have another question from the chat, and you're all welcome also to put them in the Q&A as well, just to make sure we're not missing them. But this question is about practitioners and how we can include them. So one of our programs is incorporating 360-degree evaluations as the nurse practitioners are frequently providing assistance and supervision, especially for more junior fellows. How can this group of providers be included in the new guidelines? And I'm assuming that means in terms of helping with evaluations. But Susan, please let me know if I'm not representing your question appropriately. And I'm going to give this to Megan. Sorry, Megan, I should have told you that in advance.
This is for the APPs. One, I think it's on all of us to take these new milestones and present them to our group. And I'm using the word group loosely because that needs to include your faculty, but that may actually need to include more people depending on who's involved in your evaluation process. I also think if you're at a moment in time when you're ready to have the CCC own the milestones and have your group, whoever your evaluators are, fill out a different evaluation form that the CCC can then use to assign milestones, now is sort of the time to think about who those groups are and whether they're going to give you more comment-based feedback or what it is that you're hoping to get from all your different evaluators and how that information is going to feed to the CCC so that they can then assign milestones. Maybe you're going to have topics and you're just going to ask for comments on the topics and then you'll do the numbers later, or maybe you'd like to collect numbers and then translate that. And I think either is fine.
Thanks, Megan.
The next thing I see on the chat, it's more of a comment, not really a question, but anyone can also address it as well if you'd like. But from Melissa Carbajal, she said, we are using milestones to evaluate global growth development over time. I think it's impossible to use them for rotation evaluations, which are short-term observations. I asked faculty to use verbiage for milestones to help them set expectations and give feedback, but I think eval should have different wording. Any comments from the panelists on that?
I mean, I think it's hard, right? I think, Melissa, I agree with you that the CCCs really do need to be big picture progress over time, and evals, especially if your faculty are rotating it like 2 weeks or 1 week at a time, it's just a point in time. But I think that you get enough points on your scatter plot, you start getting a sense of where people are. Part of that is also, I think, how you structure your CCCs. I mean, I think we spent the first half of each CCC talking about big picture, and then we move on to the much more discrete points of milestones. So we have work a little bit at both, but we start with the big picture so that we can really better inform the holistic view of the fellow. I know that doesn't quite answer what you asked, Melissa, but but I do think it's actually a little bit hard to do, but I actually think that's how I'm trying to address it in my program.
Thanks, Patrick. Deidre's excited about using Jazzed. I wanna attend Deirdre's jazzy faculty development session. Maybe she can open that up to the broader community. For Beverly, I have some numerical based questions for you. Patrick had made a comment about the need to level set with both fellows and faculty that the average rating on Milestones 2.0 is going to be 1.5 to 2 points lower than we're typically expecting. Beverly, if you have a more senior fellow who's got a lot of ratings of 2, and we've sort of generally accepted 3 as the expectation for graduation, what do you do as a program director?
I think one of the really important things is for the CCC to be really on task. And that's what I do with my meetings, because I find, as I said previously, sometimes the evals are putting a fellow at 5 when they really aren't. So we use a lot of the summaries, the sort of the qualitative comments and those kinds of things to really look at the milestones and see where the evaluations fall, but then based on all the other information, are those accurate? Have the faculty really accurately evaluated that fellow, or are they too low, or are they too high? So we actually sometimes will adjust if we feel, and I think it's also really important to look at the different years of fellows. So sometimes we'll start our CCC with the 3rd years, so that when we're looking at the 2nd and the first years, we have a frame of reference. But really, we do modify the milestones, even if the evals come out that somebody's a 2, but all the comments really put them at a much higher level. We will adjust them accordingly, but obviously it's with the whole CCC as a group effort and really hammering, through it and discussing it carefully. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thanks, Beverly.
All right, I assigned the next one to Megan. And it's kind of a comment question. The issue is that your GME department and CCC always compare your program to national data. It's really important that we're all on the same page when we collect the national data. Megan, any comments on that?
Totally agree. I mean, the goal of publishing the changes, having a webinar, and then, we encourage everybody to present this to your faculty to get around this issue. It's only going to work if all of us adjust the way that we use these. I think, if the first couple of years are going to be a learning curve, if your GME office is giving you a hard time, that's your opportunity, to educate them that there was a recent change and that this is a learning. And if they are giving you a hard time past that, that's what the ONTPD is for. One of us will write a more formal letter saying, the milestones have changed and we're encouraging programs to adjust their use of these, but that there are still some programs that have not changed, and that's creating a mean that's staying a little higher than we would have hoped. We're hoping the national mean goes down. These are written to readjust that national mean, which was inflated for a lot of programs.
I think it's a great question, though, because I think maybe we, as a community, just really need to be thoughtful and stress over the next couple months what the actual level should be. Because I think that those very first milestones, all 105 to 110 of us submit, are going to be critical. If we all stick to our guns and rate people appropriately between a 1 and a 3, we're going to be great as a community. If we get a little cold feet and a bunch of us rate all of our fellows as 5s, which would be, the Albert Einstein of fellows, we're going to be, half of us are going to be sad and half of us are going to, have overdone our fellows.
Yeah, I'm planning on incorporating the new milestones into orientation each year to normalize that we expect people to start at a 1 to 1.5 unless you really have had an extensive amount of background in a specific area.
Yeah, and I mean, I had a meeting semi-annual with a fellow half an hour before this webinar, and I flat out told him that we looked at milestones, and I said, "You're a 3.5 now. You're going to be 2 if you're lucky next year, right?" And you will have improved.
Yeah.
And I think hopefully people are going to feel okay about it because, and I give Megan so much credit for this, they really took away those negative wording. So hopefully people aren't going to be as fixated on the number, but the description is still one that shows growth and positivity. And on the same wavelength of Megan, Megan is our project master, and I just want to call attention in the chat. She wrote us, if anyone is interested in working on a shared ONTPD faculty evaluation form, please contact her, and she will find time to set up a group to work on that.
I will
which is really exciting.
I will send out a all ONTPD, PDAPD email next weekend, because I think the group of us are going to meet again on Friday, and so hopefully we'll have some discrete opportunities for the larger community. So look for that email Friday afternoon, Saturday, Sunday.
Perfect. And Margarita, did you assign that? I can't assign in the Q&A, so it looks like you have assigned someone. I'm going to let you do that.
I did. I assigned this one to Beverly. Is what's supposed to occur in all specialties and residencies. So should the GME not be surprised?
I'm sorry, I didn't get all of that and I can't actually see it. Could you repeat it?
Is this supposed to occur in all specialties and residencies? So the new milestones and the expected lowering of the milestones. So should GME not be surprised when the national data might currently reflect higher than what we are now with the new milestones going to rate people?
So there are a number of specialties that have had the Milestones 2.0 come out previously. I think we're sort of towards the tail end. So I would imagine GME's had an opportunity to see the impact of Milestones 2.0, but we suspect that people are going to be lower than where they were, so not higher. So I assume that GME has already had some experience and some exposure, given that Milestones 2.0 have come out already in other fields. So hopefully it won't be a complete reset for them, and they'll be aware.
Thanks, Beverly. I'm going to get the next one to Patrick. How are people structuring their evaluations to reflect the new milestones?
I think that's like the $1 million question. I think some of us have started to work on it. Like I've thought a lot about it, but don't actually have anything in writing yet. That's kind of my next couple week project. But I think that may be the big question that Megan's group tries to answer sooner rather than later, because I can't imagine we're going to get it right on round one. And so having a bunch of people get into the room and share success stories is probably the best way to do this. So I plan to use language as close as I can across multiple domains to like essentially map evals to very tentative milestones as a starting point for the CCC. And then the CCC's big picture take on the fellow will modify those milestone numbers. And then ultimately those milestones will then directly map onto the EPAs. So double mapping, which sounds not so great when you actually say it out loud.
Okay, Megan, how do you acknowledge the excellent first-year fellow who, by virtue of their level of training, cannot be expected to have achieved higher level milestones? Conversely, fellows who need a lot of growth may nevertheless achieve levels 1 or 2.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of getting at the like, what can the eval give you and what can't it give you? I think it's on all of us during the CCC meeting to figure out what the strengths are of this fellow. And that may come through in the numbers, or that may just be things that you take down as notes for the semi-annual review. There's going to be times when it's a strength that's not well captured by the milestones, like maybe they have a lot of perseverance, or maybe they've stayed upright through a lot of personal challenges, you know, or maybe it is something in the numbers and you can call out that, hey, you know, I know medical knowledge has been a real area you're struggling with, and I appreciate your work on that, but I want to call out that your professionalism has been excellent, and that's really reflected in the numbers you're seeing. I love Brene Brown's feedback checklist, which is like the list of things that you have to be ready to say and do in order to give someone else feedback. It's on her website. I can find the link, but it's like, I have to be willing to look for your strengths, you know, no matter how challenging the feedback is that I have to give. I take notes. I write down like some nice things people said, any strengths at all you can dig out, even if all of the milestone numbers are going to be a 1. There's got to be something positive to be said.
I love the optimism and the positivity, Meg. The next question is going to be for Beverly. Beverly, do you think it's possible to use the milestones as a means of evaluating fellows by the faculty instead of using different evaluations and mapping it to the milestones? So using the actual milestones as your evaluation.
I think with this set of milestones, it might be more feasible. I've always tried not to because I have found the milestone language so, I find, ambiguous and just not user-friendly. So I think it's certainly more usable or more user-friendly than version 1.0. I tend to develop my evaluations without using the direct language and then map the milestones because I think I like to keep the language as simple and easy as possible for faculty to get through. But again, I do think with this set 2.0, I think they're much more streamlined, much more focused, much more applicable. So it certainly could be possible to just use that language directly.
That might be the basis of a compare and contrast study, right? Where some people feel that the milestones are usable enough that they can do as a direct eval versus people who map.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think one of the things we noticed when we were creating the 2.0, when it went to the comments section, some of the comments we got back for certain ones of the milestones were by faculty won't be able to evaluate this after an on-servers rotation. Or, so there are different milestones that you're going to have to evaluate in different ways. I don't think you can use just the milestones directly into one evaluation.
It's a great point, Margarita. I think that we may have gotten to the end of the Q&A and the chat questions. Are there any that we missed, Margarita?
I don't see any other ones.
So I think we're perfectly on time. Heather, would you like to wrap us up?
Why, sure, Lindsay. I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us today, and a giant thank you to our my fellow milestone working group members. This group really did put a lot of effort and thought into trying to create milestones that are one, user-friendly, two, milestones that really only focus on one like actionable skill per milestone. And also to really make them much more user-friendly, remove negative language, and really trying to help you level set for your evaluation. So we hope we succeeded in that direction. You are welcome to give any of us feedback about your experience using the milestones, and again, look for, hopefully some more information from ONTPD about, common evaluations that might be useful for your programs. And certainly don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us in the working group if you have questions, and share with us your successes about employing the milestones and also your challenges. And hopefully when we someday do milestones 3.0, we'll really have perfected it with third time's the charm. So thanks again for joining us this afternoon, and I hope everyone has a great week.